पृथिवी शान्तिरन्तरिक्षगं शान्तिर्द्यौः शान्तिर्दिशः शान्तिरवान्तर दिशा शान्तिरग्निः शान्तिर्वायुः शान्तिरादित्यः शान्तिश्चन्द्रमा शान्तिर्नक्षत्राणि शान्तिरापः शान्तिरोषधयः शान्तिर्वनस्पतयः शान्तिर्गौः शान्तिरजा शान्तिरश्वः शान्तिः पुरुषः शान्तिर्ब्रह्म शान्तिर्ब्राह्मणः शान्तिः शान्तिरेव शान्तिः शान्तिर्मे अस्तु शान्तिः. May there be peace on earth and in the sky. May there be peace in the water and in all directions. May there be peace in the plants, in the trees and in animals. May there be peace in the hearts of all beings. May there be peace in everyone and in everything. Sarvetra sukhinas santu, sarve santu niramayaha. Sarve bhadrani pashyantu ma kaschid dukkha bhag bhavet. Sarvastaratu durgani sarvo bhadrani pashyatu. Sarvas sadbuddhimapnotu sarvas sarvatra nandatu. May all be happy and healthy. May all see what is good, and may no one experience misery. May all overcome their obstacles and acquire good tendencies. May people everywhere find joy and fulfillment. Let us now spend some time touching the center of peace and joy in our hearts. A good way to begin the practice is to withdraw the scattered energies of the mind and bring them to rest on one point. That point can be our own breathing. Let us therefore practice breathing with awareness. As we breathe in, let us visualize that our body and mind are being filled with love, strength, and compassion. And as we breathe out, let us release all the stress, anxiety, and exhaustion in the body and mind. Let us practice this way for a while. Let us now turn our attention to the region of our heart. Although God is present everywhere and in everyone, the divine presence can be felt most clearly in our own hearts. We can meditate in any way we have been taught. To remain focused, we can take the help of a short mental prayer or a mantra or a divine name. Let us now spend some time dwelling on the presence of God in our hearts. Om Asatoma Satkamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Aviravirmayeti Rudrayatte Dakshinam Mukham Tenamam Pahi Nityam. May the Divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the Divine Consciousness fill our hearts and protect us. We start today with the sixth and the concluding chapter of this book. So all the major teaching that Yama wanted to give has been given. So this chapter summarizes some of the essential ideas that Yama has given to Nachiketa. Primarily the ideas dealing with the self. The original question of Nachiketa to Yama was that when a person dies, does anything survive death? Or is death the end of everything? Or if there is something that remains? So in other words, the question was, who is the real person? So when we use terms, the first person pronoun, like I am sitting, I am talking, I am doing this, the word or the idea of I that is present in our consciousness, both in our waking state and in the dream state. What does that I really signify? Who is that I? And usually, when we think of I, this visible body, the mind, the ego, the whole package is taken together is what my I is. But we know this whole package doesn't survive death. Death means this body becomes non-functional, and we know whether the body is cremated or it is buried, ultimately it is going to end up with just a heap of ashes or a heap of dust. So, if body were an integral part of me, then I am no longer fully I. If body is all that I am, then that's the end. But if we believe that more, besides the body, there are other things in me, the mind, the ego, the feelings and emotions. Now, the mind cannot be buried or cremated the way the body is. So those who believe that there is such a thing as a mind apart from the body have something to think about, like what happens to this mind after death, after the body becomes non-operational. And then there is a further question. The body, the mind itself is always changing. We know, even in the course of a single day, the different moods that the body has, some mind has. Sometimes it feels active, sometimes it feels restless, sometimes it is lethargic. So the mind has its ups and downs. So, is there anything stable, unchanging in my personality other than the body and mind? And that is what Yama has been teaching Nachiketa. Yes, besides the body, besides the mind, besides all these material parts, so to speak, of my personality, that there is something else. And that something else, the word that is used in Upanishad is simply the Atma. Or Atma, literally translated, means self, me, the real me, as opposed to these fake me's, if you like. In other words, the body and mind which pretend to be me, but which are not really me. So that nature of that real me is being described now in Yama, by Yama, in this concluding chapter. Let's read the first verse. Urdhvamulo avak shakha esho shvathas sanatanaha tadeva shukram tad brahma tadeva amrutam muchyate tasmin loka shrita sarve tadunatyeti kaschana etadvaitat. This is the ancient Ashwatha tree, whose roots are above and whose branches spread below. That is verily the pure, that is Brahman, and that is also called the immortal. In that rest all the worlds, and none can transcend it. Verily, this is that. So this imagery is familiar to those of you who have studied in the Gita. In the 15th chapter of the Gita, Krishna also refers to a tree, an upside down tree. The trees that we are familiar with, the roots are below and the tree grows upward and with branches and leaves and all of that. Now this tree is a little bit unusual, it's upside down. You will find in the Gita oftentimes echoes of the teachings given in the Upanishad. Now the Upanishads are much older than the Gita. And now we don't know. The Gita are not really the exact words of Krishna. There wasn't really anybody, there was no tape recorder there. There wasn't anybody taking down notes. We don't even know how long the teaching of the Gita took. It's possible that Arjuna had this hesitation, doubt whether what he should do. He didn't want to fight, and he told Krishna, you know the story, that he wouldn't fight. And then Krishna admonishes him, like, what happened to you, and so on. And then Arjuna recognizes that, well, I'm confused. I don't know what my duty is. And he seeks refuge at the feet of Krishna and says, please accept me as your student. I'm really confused. Tell me what I should do. And then begins this long discourse of Krishna, which is now become known as the Gita. Now, how long that discourse was, we don't know. It seems logistically, it seems a little bit unusual because the Gita as it is now, approximately 700 verses, no matter how fast you chant it, it's going to take at least an hour, probably more. And we read in the beginning of the Gita, all the thousands of soldiers on either side have gathered, and the formal beginning of the war has taken place. All the main warriors on either side have blown their conches. And so now when it's about to start, Arjuna has this doubt. So it seems unlikely that all of those thousands of soldiers are just kind of waiting, when will this talk stop and we can get on with our business of fighting. So we don't know. It is possible that when Arjuna expressed his hesitation, maybe in a few words, and Krishna taught him or told him what he should do. It's possible for the highest of teachers to give this profound teaching in sometimes even through a look, sometimes maybe through a few words. And then Arjuna says, my doubts are gone, I'm ready to fight. Maybe it might have taken just a few minutes. We don't know. Now, luckily for us, it was this insight of Vyasa, to whom is attributed this teaching of the Gita, that he was able to see, because of his yogic powers, he was able to see the insight that Krishna gave to Arjuna, and then put that insight into these 700 verses. So don't be under the impression that you are exactly quoting Krishna. But because we are sure about the authenticity of the one who wrote down the Gita, that we can fully trust it, we are sure that none of the ideas of Krishna were distorted in the process. In that sense, those are the words of Krishna. Now, I say all this because there are a lot of verses in the Gita which echo the teachings of the Upanishads. And that is because Krishna himself had studied all the Upanishads. In those early days, all the royal families, besides of course the priests, the royal families also had this great teaching of the Vedantic texts. In fact, some of the early teachers of Vedanta were kings. They were not really Brahmins. They were from the Kshatriya clan. And so Krishna himself had studied. Now we don't know when he was teaching Arjuna whether he said, oh, in the Kathopanishad it is said so. We don't know whether that style of quoting from ancient text was present the way modern scholars and academics do. But we see that echo of those teachings in the Gita. So that's why we find an almost identical verse in the Gita as this one. So then, this tree, now why a tree? The Sanskrit word for the tree is vriksha. The etymological meaning of the word vriksha means that which is cut eventually, that which eventually dies. So, this creation is now pictured here as a tree which is upside down. The roots are above. Roots are from where the tree grows. And so roots taken to their ultimate really end up in Brahman. The tree is often called Ashwatha. Again, if you go to the root meaning of the term Ashwatha, Shva in Sanskrit means tomorrow. Tha, or stha means that which is, that which exists tomorrow. Ashwatha, makes the prefix creates an opposite. So that which doesn't exist tomorrow. In other words, that which is not eternal. That which is here today, gone tomorrow. In other words, this tree is not eternal. But the roots, the source from which the tree comes, that source is eternal, and that is Brahman. So here then is this ancient Ashwatha tree whose roots are above, and whose branches spread below. In Shankaracharya's commentary to this, if you have a text with that commentary, take a look. He gives a very elaborate description of what this tree might be. The details, for instance, he described what those branches are, what the leaves of those trees are, how the water, what gives nourishment to the tree. And interestingly, he says that the nourishment to this tree are the desires, because we know more the desires, the greater the creation. And so the water of desire which makes this tree grow. And then what do the leaves stand for? The fruits are the karmaphalas. So it's a very interesting description of what this tree is. If you're interested, you can take a look. If you're not interested, don't bother, because ultimately this tree doesn't last. So why bother wasting your time on something which is here today, gone tomorrow? So again, that's left to us. That don't take too much interest in it too, because there's a real danger that the more immersed we get in all these non-essential details, there is a chance that we may forget to take a look at the essential information. That is what Ramakrishna meant when he said that people who go to a mango orchard and those who spend their time just counting the number of trees, the branches, the leaves, and writing a big thesis on it, while someone else might just go and pluck a mango and start eating it. And Ramakrishna said, the one who starts eating the mango is the wise person. What's the point in going to a mango orchard and just counting all the leaves? So that should not happen in our spiritual life. All these texts are interesting, and there are fascinating details available either in the text themselves or in the commentaries. And read it, but don't sweat on it, because there are more important things to worry about. So this is the ancient Ashwatha tree, whose roots are above and whose branches spread below. So now he's referring to the source of that tree. That is verily the pure, that is Brahman, that is also called the immortal. So while the tree itself is mortal, the tree itself will die, the source from which it came will never go. Remembering the example of the rope and the snake will vanish as soon as there is light. As soon as the light's in the room, the snake will vanish, but the rope will always remain. The rope will not vanish when you switch on the light in the room. Exactly in the same way, this creation, this amazing creation, will last as long as ignorance remains. Once ignorance goes away, as fascinating as this creation is, it will go away. Exactly in the same way as no matter how interesting your dream might be at night, and you might revel in it, you might do great research of the things you see in your dream, but the moment you wake up in the morning, the whole dream world is vanished. And all the great discoveries you made in your dream have also vanished. Nothing remains, because the only reality in the dream was the one who is dreaming it. So that is verily the pure. By pure is meant that which is uncontaminated. Things, when they are in their purest form, they are indestructible. And so contamination means that consciousness, apparently having gotten mixed up with matter, it's what makes it impure. So that's why we always use the word pure consciousness, that which doesn't get mixed up, even apparently, with material things. That is Brahman, that is also called the immortal. In that rest all the worlds. So the entire tree is dependent on the source. We know if the roots are cut off, the tree won't survive. So all of this creation is dependent on the source, dependent on Brahman. And none can transcend it. All the laws that govern this material world, no one who is a part of the material world can transcend or change the laws of matter. That's why the freedom of the body and mind is limited. The body is a wonderful instrument, the mind is a wonderful instrument, but they have their limitations. Because the body is a part of the material world, it has to follow the laws of matter. And that's the idea. The only thing that is not a part of the material world is the Atman. And because it is not material, it is free from the laws of matter. That's why it's only with regard to the Atman, we can say it was never born, it will never die. If my I is connected with the body and mind, I'm going to die, I'm going to suffer, I'm going to have disease, I'm going to age, I'm going to have stress, anxiety. Because all of these attributes, all of these qualities belong to the body and mind. And my I has gotten stuck there. And once my I withdraws from that, doesn't matter what happens to the body and mind. I won't even know, I won't even care. We get a slight glimpse into it every night when we are fast asleep. When we are in deep sleep, no matter how worried you may be in daytime or anxious you may be about something, in deep sleep you have no anxiety, you have no worry, you have no problems of any kind, physical, emotional, intellectual, nothing. And when we wake up, all of these things come. That is because the I, which was kind of almost free, not totally free, it was still ignorant, but at least free from identification with the body and mind in deep sleep, that freedom is lost when we wake up or when we start dreaming. And that is what is meant by saying none can transcend it. Verily, this is that. The source of this tree is the Atman, pure consciousness. Verse 2. Yadidam kincha jagat sarvam prana ejati nisritam mahadbhayam vajramudyatam ya etat vidur amrutaste bhavanti. The prana being present, the whole universe comes out of him and vibrates within him. He is a great terror like the raised thunderbolt. Those who know this become immortal. The word prana here is interesting. Now, you have often read the word prana being translated in English as the life force or a vital force. Now that is definitely one way of understanding prana. But a lot of times when the word prana comes in the Upanishad, it means Brahman. It doesn't mean the prana that you have read about in Raja Yoga and others. And that is why this is very important. None of these words, prana, even the word Atman, they are not to be treated as some kind of technical terms. In other words, every time the word prana comes, this is what it means. Or every time the word Atman comes, this is what it means. You just have to see the context. In the Gita, the word Atman is sometimes used to refer to the body. It is sometimes used to refer to the mind. Here the word prana is being used to refer to Brahman. So don't immediately, as soon as you see the word Atman, think about the pure spirit. Or as soon as you see the word prana, immediately think about the breath as one manifestation of prana, not that prana. So here we see, in this particular verse, prana really stands for Brahman. So prana being present, the whole universe comes out of him and vibrates within him. Now, creation, there is always seen in terms of a motion. And in order to see motion, the motion can be perceived even only against the backdrop of something which is not moving. But the word prana, although here it refers to Brahman, it can also be seen as referring to the word prana as we popularly understand it. Swami Vivekananda mentions in his talks that it's possible to reduce matter. If you keep on reducing matter to its origin, so to speak, you go to the first manifestation of matter, if you like. and that is often called by the term Akasha in Sanskrit. And if you look at the different forces, different kinds of energy we see in the material universe, and we know, just as there is a law of conservation of matter, there is a law of conservation of energy. And while the way that energy manifests itself could be many different ways, there is magnetic energy, electricity, heat, and so on. As energy, they are all identical, but the way they manifest would be different. And so if we reduce all energies to its most basic form, it's possible to call that basic form of energy as prana, of which all these different forms of energy are just manifestations. So then we have this basic form of matter as Akasha, basic form of energy or force as prana. And so creation, that's not really the word that is used in, well, it's an English word, and all these texts are in Sanskrit. The Sanskrit word is srishti. And while the word srishti sometimes loosely gets translated as creation, we have to distinguish it from the theological meaning of creation. Now, in Abrahamic traditions, creation is often understood in terms of something coming out of nothing. That there was nothing first, and then God created this universe out of nothing. And so creation has a very specific theological meaning. Now, Srishti, therefore, is not creation in that sense. So this universe that comes out is not coming out of nothing, it's coming out of Akasha and Prana. And so there was this basic form of matter and basic form of force or energy. And so, now this is just still a very symbolical description. So if you kind of think of this all-pervading, very subtle, the subtlest form of matter, Akasha. And then at the beginning of creation, this prana, which is also very subtle, begins to vibrate a little bit. And as it vibrates, it generates all these different forms. And then this whole universe comes out. And then when what is spoken of in this text as pralaya, at the dissolution, it really means these vibrations of prana, which has really thrown this ocean of matter into trillions and gazillion different forms and shapes, that prana then starts vibrating slowly and slowly and slowly. The vibrations become less, less, less. All those forms then gradually begin to merge. And then everything remains, comes to a still. Akasha is still there, prana is still there, but all this gross manifestation of prana, of the Srishti is gone. It has gone back to the seed form. And then after a while of rest, if you like, prana starts vibrating again. And then again this universe comes out. And that is what is often referred to as a kalpa, a kind of a creation, anti-creation, period of rest, and it comes and comes. Just like everything is cyclical, this is also seen as a cyclical thing. So I mention all this to show that the word prana here, while the text itself, it means Brahman, it is also possible to understand it in this way. Now, the question is, how do we know? This is how it happens. And the answer is, we don't know. Then we say, well, what's the point then, if we are not sure that it is like this? And the answer is simply this. If by looking at this universe, questions come to our mind, like, how does it all happen? From where did it come? And so one explanation is, God created it out of nothing. And God created it in 6 days, rested on the 7th. That is one way of describing it. A second way of describing it is this. Well, there was this Akasha, there is this prana, and it happened. Now, neither of these have any proof or evidence for this. But both of these are ways of are ways which express the world, different worldviews that they represent. So this thing can not be proved by either of these, but both of these things show the worldviews. And so there is this one worldview here about God being present, and God then creates this universe out of nothing. And a second worldview is, here is this pure consciousness, and then there is this matter, akasha and prana, matter and energy, this srishti comes. Of course, it's very logical, therefore, to ask, from where does this akasha and prana come? Are they always there? And the answer is no, they are not always there, because if they were always there, then they would be God. So they are perishable. From where do they come? Well, they come from Brahman. How do they come from Brahman? They come from Brahman the same way the dreams come from us. Just as when I sleep, I forget myself and the dream comes. So, when Brahman sleeps, the first thing to emerge from Brahman's sleep would be this akasha and prana. Now, this might just happen in the less than blinking of an eye. So it's not like, oh, akasha and prana, now these forms are coming, it's going to take millions of years. It's not going to take that much time. It might later on feel as if it took millions of years, but actually it might just come at once. Just as when we start dreaming, our dream world is manufactured just at once. It doesn't take millions of years of evolution for my dream to start manifesting. Although my dream, as soon as I start dreaming, there are already mountains and trees and people and insects and animals. But in the dream, I never know that they were created at the same moment. And so don't worry about the time factor, because time is pretty relative when you go from one dimension to the other. So, space and force, akasha, matter and energy. So prana and akasha, they themselves come when through ajnana, ignorance, when Brahman forgets itself. So when prana being present, the whole universe comes out of him and vibrates within him. He is a great terror, like the raised thunderbolt. Not terror in the sense, well, don't think of those very angry, punishing God image, because it just looks like that, words like terror. The idea is that everything in this material universe is bound by material laws. You cannot transcend those laws. You cannot change the laws. You can try to fight one law with another law. It's like, well, the law of gravitation is going to drag me down. Now, I might use some other laws of science to say, but I'll still fly. Now, I'm not really changing gravity. Gravity is still there. But I'm using other, which are also within law, to be able to neutralize the effect of gravity by flying. So that's what we can do. We can manipulate one law with the other, but we cannot change the law itself. And that is what is meant by saying the great terror, like the raised thunderbolt. Those who know this become immortal. Now what does this mean? Those who know this. If I know that all of this material universe has come from that source, and as long as I'm immersed in this material universe, I am bound by all these laws. I cannot transcend it. But if I go to the source from whom all this has come, I can be free, I can be immortal. So as long as I choose to be a part of the material universe by being identified with my body and mind, by looking upon this body and mind as me, I am under this terror like the great terror. I am bound by the material laws. But if I find a way to stop identifying with these material layers, koshas over me, then I can become immortal by putting that I in the right place. It's a little bit like if you park your car in a wrong place, it will be towed away, so you'll get a ticket. If you park it in the right place, then everything is fine. Now this I is a car that we own. And we oftentimes park it in the wrong place. Our I gets parked in the body and mind. And of course, lots of tickets we have accumulated in so many births. And that's no fun because it's expensive and it's painful. So the right place to park the I is the Atman. And that is why actually, and I mentioned this on earlier occasions, the word for health in Sanskrit is swastha. Again, you can see it's like same, ashwatha, swastha. So swa is self, stha means parked. Where is your self parked? And the idea is, if my self, my I, now is parked in the real self, I am healthy. If my I is parked in a wrong place, in the body and mind, I am aswastha. Then I am parked in a wrong place, and I am going to suffer for it. And so, while these words swastha and aswastha often get used to a state of health and a state of sickness, if you go to the literal meaning, we will see that unless and until we haven't become spiritually enlightened, we are ill. We are not fully healthy. And sometimes, therefore, in devotional texts, they often refer to our present state of ignorance as a disease of worldliness. They call it bhava roga. Bhava means becoming. So that being which became this universe. So this disease of becoming, roga is disease. So bhava roga. And God is often considered the physician who cures us of the disease of worldliness. And therefore God in Sanskrit, sometimes they call bhava roga vaidya, the physician who cures us of this disease. So if we want to be healthy, there are levels of health. Just physical health is important, but so is emotional health, so is mental health, so is intellectual health, and so is spiritual health. So being healthy in every respect should not exclude spiritual health. So while all other healths are helpful, certainly very helpful, a basic minimum physical health is necessary, even in order for us to do our spiritual practice well. A mental health, a healthy mind is essential for our spiritual practice. So all of these things are important, but in themselves not enough, unless and until I become spiritually healthy. And being spiritually healthy means recognizing these insights that Yama offers to Arjuna in these first two verses. So we'll stop here right now. If you have any thoughts, ideas, questions, feel free to ask.
When Sri Ramakrishna says not to sweat the text, when in given the example of eating the mango rather than just simply going and counting the mangoes, I think some of us spend a lot of time certainly taking notes and trying to process some of what we're learning. So how do we go beyond this? Because for much of us, we've felt, at least I can speak for myself, I feel that the way to furthering is just through trying to use the mind and to...
No, we should use the mind, of course. When you go to a mango orchard, it's just like mindlessly picking any mango and eating doesn't make sense either. Some of the mangoes may not be ripe. Some of the mangoes may be eaten by worms. So it's not to discount using our mind and intellect. But if after going there, I spend all the time just counting the number of mangoes and leaves without even tasting the mango, then I'm missing something important. I mean, I might still get, maybe maybe people might appreciate, oh, you have counted the number of trees and how many. So, I mean, you might still get some praise and some recognition, but if someone else just goes and without doing any of that, but looks, here is a good mango and start eating it, that's good. So, there is place for using our intellect and mind, but what is important is to know the role of intellectual understanding in spiritual life. Because sometimes when we try to understand something and look at it from an intellectual perspective, our spiritual study could get stuck only simply in intellectual stimulation. That just because something makes sense to me intellectually, I might, if I'm not careful, begin to think, oh, okay, so now that's clear to me. No, it doesn't mean. Just because I understand something intellectually doesn't necessarily, it doesn't have the power to transform my life. So I may understand something well, I might be able to describe it well, I might be able to impress other people with my knowledge, but that still doesn't mean that my life has changed for any better. So, what eating the mango really means is, once I've got whatever knowledge that was necessary, what am I doing with that knowledge? Am I using that knowledge to become a better person? So, it should not become simply just intellectual stimulation. I mean, that has its own joys, but intellectual understanding and spiritual growth are two different things. And it's a very tricky question in some ways. So, is intellectual understanding necessary at all? How important it is to read books and scriptures? And there is really no good answer to it, because we have seen in the lives of many people, many saints, but Ramakrishna himself, he didn't study any of the Upanishad. But we might say, well, he is an avatar, he is incarnation. But even if you see in the lives of many saints, or many holy people, many people who have attained immeasurable progress in spiritual life, and they probably were not intellectuals at all. They didn't study anything. So you can't say it's absolutely necessary. Neither can you say that it is a total waste of time. Because we know that studying books, trying to understand things, it does help remove many of our doubts. It does answer many of our questions. So it is helpful, but not like absolutely necessary. Yeah. Yeah.
Maharaj, the vibration coming out of prana, is that pranab the Om?
I don't know. Could be. Doesn't matter. Whatever it is, something is coming out of something. Yeah.
Maharaj, I'm just going to ask you what Vikram asked. So where does knowledge end? Because sky is the limit. You know, I keep asking, and knowledge will come. So where it's going to be end, and where I will start practicing? Because once I want to learn more, and question comes, and I'm keep learning, but I don't know where to stop.
Right. Good question. So in the Mundaka Upanishad, therefore, classifies knowledge at two levels. He said there is lower knowledge and higher knowledge. Lower knowledge is called aparavidya, higher knowledge is called paravidya. And sorry to say, all knowledge that comes from books, including the Upanishads, including the Vedas, the Quran, the Bible, even all the scriptures of the world, all of that knowledge is lower knowledge. What to speak of physics, chemistry, and math? I mean, that's knowledge. But lower knowledge only in the sense that that knowledge can stimulate my understanding. Now, this doesn't mean that reading the scriptures of the world is a useless activity. Now, if I can use this study of the Bible, the Quran, the Vedas, the Upanishads, if I can use this knowledge to understand that imperishable reality, then that knowledge alone is the higher knowledge. So the Upanishad says, Athapara yaya tad aksharam adhigamyate. Aksharam means imperishable. So only that knowledge which reveals the eternal reality, that knowledge is the higher knowledge. And in the commentary, Shankaracharya, blunt as usual, the Upanishad is very clear. It's like lower knowledge, higher knowledge. And Shankaracharya in his commentary says, lower knowledge is ignorance. So the Upanishad is a little bit more gentle. It just doesn't want to confuse us. So it just says, no, it is good, but don't think that reading books alone can make a person enlightened. It can be helpful toward it, but merely studying the books will not, until, Swami Vivekananda puts it beautifully. He says, until the book of the heart is opened, we should read the book of the heart. Now, these external books might help us open that internal book, but it is that inner book that will free us. So that knowledge is what we want. And insofar as this knowledge might take me to that knowledge, it is useful. So merely reading too many books is not enough. We had one gentleman in Chennai where I was many years ago. When I met him, he was probably in his late 60s or early 70s. He was a single man and great interest in studies. And so he was a tutor in the college, the Vivekananda College run by the order. And so he could have been a professor. He had all the qualifications for it. But he was not so social. He didn't want to deal with students or anything. So he chose to just do something that didn't require too much social contact. And then how would he spend his time now? There is no family at home. So he just started he did masters in like 5 or 6 times. And then he narrated to me once. He said, one day when he had gone to college, so one of the staff there, who was a clerk in an office or something in the college, looked at him and said, in India it's very customary to refer to everyone as sir. It's kind of the British influence. And so one of the staff told him, sir, you're collecting all these degrees. It's just nothing but vanity. And he felt it so much. So he said, I stopped then doing all. Again, I was reminded of that. But in the Upanishad, in the Chandogya Upanishad, there is the story of Narada. The same Narada comes in the Bhakti text as well as in the Upanishad as well, who studied all these Upanishads, studied all these texts. And then he says, I still don't have peace of mind. And so there are many instances like this where through history, through mythology, and in all these epics, we find instances of people saying merely study of books cannot give us that complete fulfillment. It can give us a little bit of fulfillment, but not total fulfillment. So all the study that we are doing here, if we want this study to reach its logical conclusion and fulfillment, we should not be satisfied by merely understanding what the Upanishad is. We must somehow relate it to our own spiritual quest and see how it can deepen our own practice, because that is what this book is meant for. Any other mind?
Swamiji, I completely agree with your point about intelligence doesn't just help. So, as a sort of person during the day where you are sort of interacting, how can you remain conscious? Because if you are not conscious, that's when you react to something adversely as
Right.
opposed to positively.
Right.
And that's unless you're meditating and consciously all day, you will be finding it difficult when
Yeah.
you're interacting.
And that's true. That's true. And that is why in the beginning we have to make an effort. We have to make an effort to remind ourselves as often as we can about this truth. Because the problem is that we have forgotten it. The solution has to be that we have to try to remember it. That's the only way. And once it becomes internalized, once it kind of enters deep, Swami Vivekananda might say oftentimes that when it kind of courses through your veins and into every drop of blood, it's kind of a way of saying, then you don't have to make very conscious effort to remember it. Think about it this way, that I am a human being. Now, in the course of the day, we are meeting so many people, busy with so many things. I don't have to remind myself, I'm a human being, I'm a human being. Why do I not have to remind myself? Because that identity has gotten deep inside me to the point, no matter what I do, I always know I'm a human being. I may not consciously remember it, but I always know. Now that has gone so deep that it really has to be plucked out. You know, sometimes if a thorn or a small piece of glass or something enters inside, it can be extremely painful. And if I ignore it, and it might kind of go deeper and deeper and deeper inside, then extracting it becomes even more difficult. So this is the thorn of this identity of a body and mind, the material identity. That thorn has gone deep inside me. And so the only way the what do you call that, clippers or forceps to remove that? Well, whatever instrument you need, this is the Upanishad that will help us kind of go find that source of that false I, take it out, and the only way to take it out is then put the real I inside. The real I will go inside and drive away that false I. So because it's like this, I cannot simultaneously, at the same time, I cannot be both. I cannot be a material being and a spiritual being at the same time. I cannot be. Although many of us would say, oh, I would like to be Brahman, but I would like to be the body and mind also. I'm sorry, that doesn't work. It's like you cannot see the rope and snake at the same time. You cannot. If you see the snake, you cannot see the rope. If you see the rope, the snake has vanished. Now, as long as I see myself as a human being, I cannot see myself as a divine being. I can intellectually think of myself as a divine being. So, intellectually, I think of myself as a divine being. As I go through the day, in practice, I'm a human being. And therefore, of course, this intellectual thing is not strong enough. Now that has to descend from my intellect into my heart. And so, consciously reminding myself of my spiritual identity. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be always like, I'm the Atman, which could be for those people who like to look at it that way. But many of us who are of a devotional temperament, there are other ways of eliminating our material identity. And that is what Ramakrishna meant by saying, replacing the unripe I by the ripe I. So rather than seeing myself as this human being, just some creature, doing this, doing that, can I replace that by saying, I'm a child of God? Or I'm a servant of God? Or any kind of an identity that is directly or indirectly related to God or related to spirituality. And that, if I can remember that, even if I do it imperfectly in the beginning, even an imperfect practice of that, I will be able to notice a sufficient amount of change in the way I look upon myself, in the way I look at the world, in the way I do my work, in the way I relate myself to other people. And if I continue with that practice and gain greater proficiency in it, I will begin to see a real transformation. So the transformation can occur only when this I gets parked in the right place. And that is what transforming that unripe I into ripe I means. And that is hard work. Sure, in the beginning, I might forget most of the time. But that's why sometimes spiritual teachers often advise their students to practice their prayer and meditation at least twice a day. And that is meant so that in those 2 times that I sit down to pray and meditate, I'm affirming my spiritual identity. And if I can do it with intensity, with faith, with devotion, then it's possible that as soon as my meditation ends, a little bit of that effect will remain even when I get up from my meditation seat. Now, it's possible that after a few minutes or an hour, that effect is gone and I've become this old self again. So, can I find now some way, some creative way of trying to remind myself of this throughout the day? And sometimes people do. I mean, sometimes you've seen people when at their workplace, near their desk sometimes, they might have a small picture of their spouse or their children. Because, not that they have forgotten their children, but it's like, oh, I'm so busy with work. But I like to remember my children at home. And so you have a small picture or something. People do that. And so a spiritual seeker can say, well, I can carry something with me, maybe a picture of a spiritual ideal or a symbol that will remind me of that. A lot of people have something on the dashboards of their cars, again, or on your, put on your a magnetic sticker on your refrigerator. I mean, if we really want to remember, we can find innovative ways of doing it. And the more often I'm able to remember this throughout the day, the quality of my 2 major meditations in the morning and evening, that will improve. And so there is no shortcut for this. It is hard work. Because the problem is forgetfulness, the solution will only be through remembrance. And doggedly, with using our willpower, our determination, we are like Arjunas. We just say, oh, that is so impossible. I'm never going to be able to do it. And what Krishna would say is, no, get up, do it. You should do it. That's my take on it. Yeah. All right, so we'll stop here this week. And when we meet next Wednesday, we'll begin with verse number 3. Om Jananim Saratam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhurmuhu. Our topic next Sunday for satsang will be overcoming greed. In the month of April, we took a look at overcoming fear. Last month, in the month of May, we saw overcoming loneliness. And this month, we'll see overcoming greed. These are among the 3 major obstacles or hurdles in spiritual life. And so, next Sunday, we will see what role greed plays in our life and what we can do to overcome that. And next Wednesday, we'll continue with the study of the Upanishad. Tuesday and Saturday, our meditation will also continue as usual. Let's conclude with a prayer now on page 3. May the Divine Being, who is the Father in heaven of the Christians, Holy One of the Jewish faith, Allah of the Muslims, Buddha of the Buddhists, Tao of the Taoists, Ahura Mazda of the Zoroastrians, the Great Spirit of the Native Americans, and Brahman of the Hindus, lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May we be granted strength, freedom, and clear understanding. May we learn to see God in our own hearts and in everyone around us. May God bless us all and fill our hearts with gratitude, grace, and love. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.